Hello, Confidant here, another Topic of the Week video. And this week, I'm going to be talking about rewriting Goro Akechi. This week's topic was submitted by a Tumblr anon, and their topic is, what went wrong with Akechi's writing, and how would you fix it so he's a better villain? Okay, so, in the topic video I did recently on Akechi's Royal Confidant, and frankly, how it did immeasurable damage to his character, and was lots of bad ideas. Very badly written. I discussed some of the major problems with Akechi. Now, I won't be going into immense depth into every little single problem with him because the list is long. But I'll go over some of the major ones and what I do to fix these. So, the biggest problem with Akechi overall is that he's not consistently written. On one hand, he'll be this complete and total evil psychopath who's unrepentant about all of the horrible stuff that he's done.
I'll tell you all about my true power. While you die, you can take that knowledge with you to the grave. The mental shutdowns aren't the only incidents people are talking about. There are also the breakdowns which cause people to turn psychotic, creating accidents and scandals. Those cannot be explained unless the true culprit has the power to make people's hearts psychotic. That's right. It's my power. One that you don't have. Now, let's see you drop dead one at a time in front of your precious friends.
But then on the other hand, they'll be like, oh, but feel sorry for him. He has a sad backstory. He doesn't feel bad about what he did, but please feel sorry for him.
I'll kill you. You're all gonna die.
Will you please stop? You're fighting the wrong people! We both hate the same guy! Why do we have to go against each other? Killing us won't make you happy.
But... This ain't about what Shido says. You're your own person. You gotta know that. Damn it!
You know, sometimes I think about that fake medjed that you guys made up. That was the worst trap, but if not for that, I don't think I'd be here right now. Basically, it doesn't matter where you start over. And you don't really hate Joker, do you? That smile before we fought. Isn't that how you really feel? Follow your true feelings, even if you think people hate you or don't want you around. That's...
And then randomly he'd be like, maybe we could have been friends. And I'm like, you never developed that. Now you see, you could actually have either different interpretation, but you gotta commit. You can have Akechi be an evil, unrepentant monster who did horrible stuff. He could have been more like Adachi. It may not have been as interesting, and it may have been a little bit repetitive, but it would have been better than the mess that we got. If you just had him evil and treated as such, he would have been a fine villain. Just a bad guy who lied and cheated and killed to get what he wants. Not too complicated, but hey, not bad. You could have also moved this a little bit more into the sympathetic territory and made him a really tragic villain. Like, really tragic. You can still keep his backstory, but flesh it out. Actually explain it. Explain how this backstory was so damaging to him. And show that, even though he has a similar backstory to some other members of the Phantom Thieves, that he went down a darker route. And maybe, if they had stopped him before, maybe they could have saved him, but he's too far gone by now. You know, he dies, and it's really tragic, and you feel sorry for him. You feel pity for him, even if he wasn't a good person. You say, well, it's sad that it happened that way, which is kind of what they were trying to do in Persona 5, but they never properly did it. The other way, and this is more how I would handle it, you can have Akechi be a very complex character who is sympathetic and someone that you can feel sorry for and does horrible things, but you want him to be better. right? You have enough depth to his character to see that there's more to him than just being an evil person. Sometimes they tried to dip into that side in Persona 5 and even in Royal, but then they just never really properly committed to it. You can't just have him go, but I wanted to be loved, I wanted people to pay attention to me, without actually, developing that as a part of his character. Another major problem with Akechi is the way he's utilized within the story. And this is starting to get into a bit more of the nitty-gritty details. But from the first time you meet Akechi in the game, red flags are already flying up. The pancake line, as memed as it was actually a really terrible thing. Because it instantly clued people that he could understand Morgana. And a lot of people caught on to that. That wasn't some really subtle hint that no one noticed until the second playthrough. Especially because later in the game they point out that that was one of the reasons why they eventually caught on to him. And Akechi's supposed to be smart. Like, this is a problem of Akechi is supposed to be a smart guy, a smart villain, but he's really not portrayed as such, and it gets kind of frustrating. I want him to be an intelligent villain. Adachi, as goofy as he could be, was an extremely intelligent villain. Like, he's very, Akechi in a lot of ways is a fusion of Naoto and Adachi, and I'm like, okay, that's an interesting concept. Do something with it. And one of the big problems is the way Akechi comes off at first. He's against the Phantom Thieves from the beginning, which, alright, that's not that big of a deal. What's the problem? But the problem is that he continues to be against the Phantom Thieves over and over and over and over and over again until right before he tries to join, and all of a sudden he's kind of lightening up on the Phantom Thieves. It starts coming off as suspicious. Because if you had done something like had him slowly develop more positive feelings until he decides to, do the attempt to join the team, you may have been able to work with that. I mean, the way I would handle it is I would have Akechi be more neutral at first. Like, okay, well, they've gone after bad guys. They've helped the police capture people who had done horrible things that either we didn't know about or we could never actually get, or stuff that we can never actually prove and actually arrest someone. So it's helpful, but we don't know enough about them, right? So I can't fully commit to this. And I actually wrote a short one-shot fanfic called The Star Detective, which is basically a rewrite of the whole meeting Akechi at the TV station. And that's what I do with it. I have Akechi seem far more reasonable. So he's like, alright, the Phantom Thieves seem to be doing good stuff, but we can't be totally sure about them. Which, that's a fair assessment. He doesn't have a full idea about who they are, at least from what he's portraying, because he knows more than he lets on because he's the metaverse assassin. But he's going, alright, this is what we're trying to figure out, we don't know what's going on with the Phantom Thieves, and it feels a lot more natural. And it makes it a lot easier to become endeared to Akechi, because the police don't like them, so you have this guy associated with the police, and, well, he seems to be a little bit more neutral about it. And then over the course of the story, I would have him become more and more positive to the Phantom Thieves, and this is starting to cause tensions between him and the police. The police who don't like the Phantom Thieves. So by the time you get to the point where he would join, and you could have even had him join later like he does by doing this same thing, but then have it be that it makes sense. He's someone who's on the outs with the police now, and no one really trusts him. He has issues talking to Sai, and you have all these problems. You could have done stuff like that. You could have had him join late and still made it work if he had an understandable line of thinking that you, as the player, can understand and feel some sympathy towards, because it seems to be setting up a very similar situation of, he's a kid being used by rotten adults, and now he's being mistreated and ostracized because he doesn't blindly support everything they tell him to. Okay, that seems like it's more in line with the other members of the Phantom Thieves and how they joined. So him joining up with the team wouldn't feel so odd. I would even include, like, an appearance of him at Shujin early on, sort of asking around but getting shut down by the principal. You wouldn't really know him, you wouldn't understand who he is at the time, but it's him looking into stuff that he had heard about, showing that he's trying to be proactive in figuring stuff out, but he got stonewalled by the principal because, he's protecting Kamoshida at the time. So, right then, you can understand, oh, this was a guy who was trying to help out before, but because he was working within the system, unlike the Phantom Thieves, he couldn't make any progress. So at that point, you already have a bit more of a positive feeling towards Akechi. And another thing that I would do, and this is very heavily altering his backstory, but also I feel would make him much more fleshed out, is that he actually has a much stronger connection to Makoto and Sai. So, Makoto and Sai's father, who in this version would be named Masato Nijima, he first met Akechi after Akechi's mom committed suicide, because that's the whole backstory about her meeting Shido, getting knocked up, then getting dumped by Shido because she's politically inconvenient. Basically all that's still the same, and because of depression and crappy things going in her life, she ended up taking her life, leaving Akechi an orphan, being passed around from house to house, and never really being loved. But Masato Nijima was always there to be like a mentor to him. And eventually, over some years, he became like a father to him. Akechi became close with Sai and Makoto, basically seeing them as sisters, and seeing Masato Nijima like a father. And it got to the point where Masato saw the way that he was being treated by these other families and was thinking, you know what? Like, I was just sort of helping him out, but then he's thinking, he feels like a son to me. Like, I'll adopt him. I'll do it officially. And make him be a part of my family. And Akechi, at that time, started to be happy. He started to be taken care of by Masato Nijima. He felt like he had a family. And while he had always had this idea of getting revenge on his father, he figured out he was, Masayoshi Shido, but he never really had a means or a way to do it. But as he was spending time with the Nijima family, his desire for revenge started to wane, and he started thinking, I could try to do something to get revenge, but I have a family. Like, he started to be happy. The hole in his heart was being filled, so he didn't really need to get revenge. And then Masato Nijima dies. We learn about this at Makoto's Confidant, and I would heavily expand on this in my own version of the story. But you find out that this is what set Akechi off. Like, the man who was like a father to him, the man who wanted to officially adopt him, it pushed all the thoughts of wanting revenge on Shido out of his head until he died, and then that's when Akechi just decided to commit to his revenge. And not long after that was when Yaldabaoth chose him to give him his powers, use him as his own little chess piece in his game against Igor. So he discovers his powers, develops his powers, and then approaches Shido and offers his powers up like he does in canon. So then he does all the stuff he does, and he kills people in order to get closer to Shido. Now, his initial idea was, I'll sneak into his palace, though he wouldn't be calling it a palace. He would have his own terms for it, because he had to come up with this stuff before he met the Phantom Thieves, and the Phantom Thieves had their own naming conventions for things. But he would go into this place that he knows that Shido's shadow is in, and he would kill him. Boom. Easy solution. Except, he can't. He's too well guarded. It's too strong. And his power is not great enough. So then he figures, okay, I can't immediately do this, but what if I take the slow approach? So he starts to play the long con. he tries to win Shido's trust, to be such a loyal henchman to him, so that he can gain access to Shido's shadow to kill him in the metaverse. So, over a couple of years before the game starts, he's slowly killing people and causing mental shutdowns, and causing the psychotic breakdowns, and doing all this stuff for Shido, just so that he can inch his way closer to him, and maybe get his chance at revenge. But Akechi wasn't a fully evil person when he started this, so he had to justify what he did. Because he's not just causing people to go crazy and possibly ruining their lives, he is actually killing people. He's causing mental shutdowns, which in many cases cause death. Not all the time, but quite often they lead to death. And for the most part, a lot of these targets are corrupt politicians, corrupt businessmen, nasty people who are doing horrible stuff. And he can convince himself that, look, I'm killing bad people, and if I kill a bunch of bad people, and then I also kill Shido, then that's a net positive, right? And he does this no matter how bad he's getting. He finds a way to sort of justify it in his head, even causing psychotic breakdowns in normal, average, everyday people. And either pinning them for crimes or using them to help sabotage stuff that Shido or his associates want sabotaged. He finds ways to say, in the long run, this is good. This is fine. And look, I'm not killing all those people. This is just... You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, right? That is. Until Wakaba. He still kills Wakaba in this. But
things will be a little different.
So when Shido sends him to kill Wakaba, he doesn't really care about who she is. He never really thinks about the details of the targets, because that might lead to him thinking a little too much on stuff, and he doesn't want to focus on that. So he goes to find Wakaba's shadow in the metaverse, and she's got this massive, fortress. It's not like a palace. But because she's so knowledgeable about cognitive science, she has intense security. It's kind of like in Inception, where people who have had mental training can have, actual mental security against people trying to infiltrate their mind. It's kind of like that. So he goes in there, kills her shadow, then he sees a cognition of Futaba, and discovers, oh, this is her daughter. She had a kid. And it causes him to freak out, because this is starting to remind him of what happened with him and his mom. And this causes him to freak out. Wakaba is the one person whose death he cannot possibly justify in his mind. Once he looked into Wakaba, and everything started to cause him to flip out more. Oh, she had a child out of wedlock, so this daughter, Futaba, was a bastard child. And now she's just been orphaned, and he finds out that she's getting passed around from family member to family member, getting abused, and this is causing Akechi to freak out. Oh no. I just put her through what I went through. So yes, he feels guilt over Wakaba. It's the only one he'd admit to. But it's the one that caused something to snap in his brain where he just could not justify it. So an interesting development in this version is that Akechi actually uses his connections to make sure that Sojiro can adopt Futaba. He looked up Sojiro, saw that he was trying to get custody from Futaba's uncle, and saw that he was a longtime associate and very, very, very close friend of Wakaba, and knew that Futaba already had a very close relationship with him anyway, so he figured, I'll give her what I never had. A father who will love her. So he pulls strings from behind the scenes. A mix of his connections that he got through working with Shido, and connections he has in the police, and a little bit of his celebrity status, to push things along to make sure that Sojiro got custody of Futaba. So when Akechi shows up in LeBlanc, he's not just showing up there randomly. He does go there. He goes in there and it's just an out of the way coffee and curry shop. It's good food, good drink. You know, seems like a nice little out of the way place to go. But in reality, he's actually checking on them. And he does this kind of obsessively. Because in his head, like, killing Wakaba was terrible, but maybe it's kind of made up by the fact that he gave her, like, a family? Like, you have your father because of me, kind of a thing. So in his head, he's, like, trying to justify it. So you have all of this depth added to Akechi in regards to that. So even if he knows what he's doing is wrong, he pushes forward. But Wakaba and what he did to Futaba, that is something he cannot get over. And when this comes up again, this is going to cause a lot of emotions from Akechi. So as I mentioned, I would have Akechi start off being more neutral and start to get more positive. However, he actually comes in much earlier. He doesn't just come in Sai's palace, betray them immediately. He actually comes in Futaba's palace pretty darn early. And the reason for this is because he got dragged in. By dragged in, it was he's been constantly watching Futaba, as I mentioned. So he was nearby when they first went into the metaverse to go to Futaba's palace. And Akechi ended up there. Oh crap. So now they're like, oh crap, now we have this guy here. And so he fakes an awakening. And he has the wild card power. He had a backup plan that if he ever had to pretend to have persona powers to someone else, he'd already had another persona set up for that. I mean, Akechi is smart, and he only has this one other persona. Because he doesn't have all these bonds, but he does have enough power for his true persona, Loki, and this other persona. It's not going to be Robin Hood. He'd have a different theming. It would be more of a 1940s noir detective look to him. Because it's the sort of, rough and tumble, out of the system, private eye kind of a character. So this is played up as Akechi's own view of rebellion. Oh, you're a private eye doing stuff outside of the immediate boundaries of the law, kind of a thing. Alright. I mean, it's a little out of place amongst a bunch of thieves, but given Akechi's purported sense of justice, it seems like it would fit. Now, another thing I should mention is that my version has a few Arcana changes. Akechi is not Justice. Akechi is actually the Tower. Makoto is made into the Justice Arcana. I won't go into all the shifts that I made, but this is the one that's most relevant. So to give a more concise description, on the Megaton Wiki, the Tower Arcana is commonly associated to overly arrogant, prejudiced, and authoritarian organizations, which walk to their own ironic demise. Furthermore, it is also generically used as an omen of doom and disaster, which Akechi kinda is. Human characters of the Tower Arcana can be arrogant and typically find themselves in bad situations where they themselves have fallen from grace, which is what's eventually going to start happening with Akechi. With the Tower Arcana, you would have Akechi as his character gets built up, and then he does have a big falling out with the police eventually. It's not like, oh, he loses his job or anything, but he does start to get ostracized a bit. And not even related to the public scene, his fall from grace involving Shido and his ultimate loss and his life crumbling, he loses all of his friendships, even his relationship with Makoto, all that will eventually crumble. So it fits the Tower Arcana, and Makoto's sense of justice fits the Justice Arcana, and there are more changes involving her, but I want to keep this focus mostly on Akechi. So Akechi joins earlier than he does normally in the game, and I want to use this opportunity to really sort of expand the time you have with his character. That way, it doesn't feel like he's there for 5 seconds and then he betrays the team. There's no blackmailing his way on. He doesn't do any of that stuff. He would have tried to get on eventually, but this was kind of a stroke of good luck that he managed to convince them to let him on. And overall, he's not going to be seen as too suspicious Until later on, they start to catch a few red flags here and there, and then they bug his phone, they figure things out, and then they pull off a very similar plan to what they do in the game, to where they trick Akechi to going into the metaverse to shoot a cognition of Ren, thinking he actually killed actual Ren, the leader of the Phantom Thieves. And then he'll eventually start to catch on to what they were doing, and then he ends up having a confrontation with them. And the confrontation is going to be far more emotional, because the Phantom Thieves spent more time with him, and they didn't find out that he was actually a bad guy doing horrible stuff and was infiltrating them to try to do bad stuff almost immediately after he joins, and he didn't blackmail his way onto the team, which made him ultra suspicious to begin with. So they actually had a genuinely good relationship with him, so his betrayal actually hits a lot harder, and it hits even harder specifically for Makoto, because Akechi was like a brother to her. Like, this is a guy, she vouched for him when he came onto the team. She vouched that he could be trusted, and her trust most of all was broken. And she's also going to reveal that Akechi isn't actually his last name, and that he actually had another name. And he started going by a different name, supposedly because, I'm getting famous, it's, more of a security thing. In reality, it was so that it helped with his infiltration of Shido's ranks, because he didn't want to risk Shido maybe recognizing his mother's last name. And Makoto and Sai started calling him Akechi because, they were respecting what he wanted to do, to go by a different name.
And because Makoto doesn't respect him anymore, she reveals that information. It's kind of an emotional reaction to his betrayal to reveal such private information. But she's so pissed off at him.
And that's going to hurt Akechi. He's actually genuinely going to be upset by this, even though he's betraying her. He was trying to, he wasn't trying to get them all killed in this version. He did want to work with them, but because they refused to kill Shido, which is his ultimate plan. He wanted to kill Shido. He didn't want to, whisper in his ear that he was his bastard child. He would have just gotten himself killed anyway. He wanted to kill Shido and just have him dead and gone. And it didn't care how long it took. He wanted to do that. When the Phantom Thieves want to change his heart, he doesn't want Shido to become a better person. He wants Shido dead. Just dead and gone. It's what happened to his mother, and it's the least of what Shido deserves. So there was that rift between him and the Phantom Thieves in that regard that really erupts during their big confrontation. Now, I haven't exactly settled how I would figure out all the little details of that. But they would have that confrontation with Akechi like they do in the game. And this is actually going to be far more explosive and emotional for them than it is in the game. They're not going to feel sorry for him at all. Futaba had actually come to really care about Akechi because his situation with his mom was so similar to the situation with her mom dying that she really started to get attached to him. So she's extra angry at him. And Haru, the death of her father is still fresh for her. So she's viciously angry, uncharacteristically so, because this is the guy who took her father away from her and robbed her of the opportunity to have that father come back, the old father that she knew and loved. And they're going to call Akechi out for this. They don't backtrack like they do in the game. And even though I set Akechi as being far more sympathetic and far more likable, they still don't go, I guess I feel sorry for you. No, none of that. They go hard. And I would actually also establish a much deeper bond between him and all of the Phantom Thieves. He has his friendship with Ren. He's a confidant, alright? So you have his relationship with Makoto, alright? He becomes friends with Haru, both of them kind of have a celebrity status. He becomes friends with Futaba because of the situation with her mother. With Ryuji, he actually, once Ryuji finds out that Akechi had a terrible father who knocked up his mom and then left, Ryuji, he connects to that. Well, it's a little bit different than what happened with his father, because he had an abusive father who was terrible to him and his mother before he decided to leave them. He bonds with Akechi on that. And with Anne, he actually sort of helps Anne with her modeling career. He's like, look, I'm a celebrity. Like, I've got connections. If you want help getting a job, I can help you. So he has this stuff that's like genuine friendship. Like, none of that stuff would be a lie. Like, he has genuine friendships with all the Phantom Thieves. So when they have to fight him, it's something that's actually hard for them. Like, not only are they actually legitimately angry at him, like, they're really angry because they did like him. They actually did come to care about him and accept him as a member of their team. So for him to betray them, it hits even harder. And then after he dies, they don't give a pity party. You know, they see he dies, you know, and, you know, they don't find the body, but, you know, after thinking that he dies, at first they're like, good riddance, but then they kind of start going, yeah, I guess he's gone now. And they're still upset and they're still angry, but they're kind of left confused because they had spent several months being friends with him. And it really does help make that scene come across the way they wanted to in the game. Because they want you to feel some connection to Akechi, and it just doesn't work. Because with the way Akechi had been written, he just wasn't all that likable. He was annoying, he was obnoxious, he was nasty and condescending, and I take all of that out and replace him with a character that people could genuinely like. This is closer to Adachi, this is a guy you get attached to, and then you find out that he was a traitor the whole time, that he was a villain doing horrible stuff. So you have a lot of that with Akechi, except instead of being an adult, he's a kid their age. He's someone who they formed a bond with. And I think this would resonate with a lot more people playing the games, because when you have all these characters, you do want to get attached to them. You do this with all the different members of the Phantom Thieves. You learn about them, you get attached to them, so you spend time with them, so you like them. So you want to be with them, you want to spend time with them and do their confidants. Even with the new characters introduced in Royal, Kasumi and Dr. Maruki, you want to spend time with them. They're likable characters. And when you get the new extra content with them, you do get attached to them. And I'll actually talk a little bit more about that stuff in another video that's going to come sometime later. And to add on to this, I would add a lot more to Akechi's character that makes him feel more like a person. As I showed in The Star Detective, he's a Naoto fanboy. Like, a big Naoto fanboy. When he was younger, you know, he read about the stuff that happened of what she was doing online, and he even remembered finding out that Naoto was a girl, and he kind of developed a bit of a crush on Naoto once she started, like, once she stopped pretending to be a guy, and he was like, oh no, this amazing detective that I looked up to is also kind of cute. And it was actually something of a bit of an escape for him in his bad family situations, that he would look up Naoto and her success and, you know, what she was doing, and she was a great role model to him. And he actually kind of resents being called the new Detective Prince, because he feels like he doesn't even deserve that. Like Naoto is like god tier to him, so being put on her level or being seen as her successor or something he doesn't even feel he's worthy of, and that's legitimate. That's not a pretending. He genuinely does really care about Naoto, and meeting her is like his dream. He's also a bit of a fan of Loveline from, you know, Persona 4. And he actually, this is a funny story. So he knows the actress for the new live-action Loveline show that's airing, you know, during the time of Persona 5, and it had been going on for several years. And what's funny is Naoto had actually guest starred on an episode of the show as, you know, another detective who came in and helped Loveline solve the case. And it was like, oh, it's the Naoto Shirogane is, you know, guest starring in this episode, kind of a thing. And Akechi mainly wanted to go on because he wanted to try to meet with Naoto, because he's such a fanboy for Naoto. But, you know, he didn't. He got his own guest starring episode where it's, oh, it's Goro Akechi! He's in this episode of Magical Teenage Detective Loveline! And he met the actress for Loveline. And at first he thought that she was sort of like, you know, a stupid bimbo like a lot of other actresses and celebrities that he had met. But it turns out she's actually really into detective novels, and she actually really does like detective work. She even wants to go into criminal justice. So he actually kind of was like, oh, he kind of respects that. So he's got this nice little friendship with her, and that's genuine, by the way. And I want to stress this. What really helps with this stuff is that a lot of these things that I'm adding to Akechi's character are genuine. He still does these horrible things, but he genuinely does have people that he does care about. Even if, personally, he kind of keeps them a bit at arm's length because he doesn't get too close. Because he's not that kind of guy. But he does have these genuine feelings towards stuff. He just never really opens up in the way he really needs to in order to activate the power of the wild card. And of course, as I talked about with his relationship to Makoto and Sai, he genuinely cares about Sai. Like, that's not a joke. That's not a manipulation. It's not a lie. He sees Sai as a big sister. Like, he adores her. So when he talks about wanting to help Sai when they go into Sai's palace, it feels a lot more genuine because you know he already has such a close relationship to Sai. Oh. Okay, this makes sense. And even when everything is going down, he's completing his plans, he kind of regrets the fact that he had to lie to Sai. I mean, he even feels bad about that because he's like, I've already betrayed Makoto. And, I'm betraying Sai. And he feels bad about that, but he keeps pushing on, even past breaking his relationship with Makoto. Even after, realizing just what he's doing to Sai, manipulating her, he pushes forward because he wants to get revenge. He doesn't get this revenge, and the stuff with Shido happens, and he gets a change of heart. And so he fails on a lot of that, and
ultimately, everything that he did, all of his destruction of his personal life and his personal relationships, was all for nothing. Which is the true tragedy of his character. Now, I haven't actually, fleshed out this different version of Persona 5, so I don't have all of the details, but a lot of that stuff is how I would handle Akechi's character. I would commit. I want to make him sympathetic and a tragic villain, and I want to make people like him genuinely. And the way you do that is you add genuine aspects to his character. Oh, he really adores Naoto. He's got a crush on her. Alright, that's actually kind of adorable. He actually has a genuine friendship with a lot of the Phantom Thieves. He is actually family to Sai and Makoto. Not by blood, but they are family. They all see each other as family. Makoto and Sai see Akechi like a brother, and he sees them like sisters. You have all these elements added to his character that make him feel like a person. And one of the biggest important things to this is I came up with a lot of these ideas not in a, I want people to like Akechi, so I'll add these likable elements to him. You see, I was developing him from the idea of, what if I just ignored his bad stuff and I just created a character? And I developed these things about him to help flesh him out. If I just went from a blank slate of there was nothing, and then there was just Akechi, he's a detective, and he's working for the cops. And I just developed it from there. And then you integrate all of the stuff with his character before into this. So then that adds a lot more complexities to his character. So when you do stuff with him, when you do stuff in his Confidant, that I have my own version of how his Confidant would play out. And to talk about that rather briefly, his whole Confidant is dealing with different cases. Now, they start off simple, and it's usually just him, chatting with Ren of, hey, here's a situation, what do you think? And then Ren helps him figure out some cases, and over the course of this, he's talking about stuff and talking about himself, and he starts to reveal these details about himself until you get to after he joins the Phantom Thieves, where you get more and you actually, have a big case where you need to go after this guy who is, a donor to the police, so he's being protected, and, and then he starts to really trust Ren, and that's when he starts to drop his, big stuff. He starts talking about his mother in more detail. Not just, my mom died, but, no, there's a lot more details to this. He doesn't say this early, but he says it later on. And it feels more natural that, okay, after we've gone through, 7 ranks and Ren has really helped him out, he starts to genuinely form a bond with him. So he feels much more comfortable actually telling him this. And then for the finale of it, the last section of it, it's actually going to be about him finding the killer
of Masato Nijima. And Makoto gets involved in this too, because this involves her as well. But it's him sort of trying to get some kind of closure on that and tracking this guy down. And this, you see that he really loved Masato Nijima. That man was like a father to him. And you kind of understand that the reason why he's so like intense about this is because his own birth father abandoned his mother. Like, okay, so it's not dropping the whole Shido was his father, but you understand naturally, it's not just spelled out, but you understand naturally why he feels these ways about the situation. And once he does this, he really genuinely thanks you for helping him, and helping Makoto and helping Sai to help them get closure on that. So by the time you finish his Confidant, I would want people to really, really be attached to Akechi and really feel for him. And then, once the reveal comes out that he was a bad guy, I want them to really be upset. Like no, they'd be heartbroken. Like, I really adored you, and then you were a liar the whole time, but not everything was a lie. And by making him a better character, he becomes a better villain. Because his role as a villain in the story was fine. It's just a lot of the finer details of how his character was written that really dragged him down. So what I wanted to do is flesh him out, make him a more complex character. A character who you can genuinely like and adore, not just as a rawr, he's an evil villain, cool, I like those, but like, I really liked his character. I thought he was complex. I thought he was really likable, despite the bad things he did. And I feel like with a lot of the changes that I make, and a lot of the alterations I made to his character, I think that this really fleshes Akechi out in a way that would have made him a much, much better character and would have fit so much better with all the other better writing of Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal. So, I think that's about it for this topic. If you want to submit a topic to me, you can comment below if you're on YouTube. If you're on Tumblr, send me an ask, put topic : then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Or if you're on the Discord server, you can go to the topic submissions channel and submit a topic there. Just make sure to follow the rules I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. So what are your thoughts on my ideas of how to rewrite Akechi, and do you have different ideas? Please comment below. And thank you for watching.